Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs, Dr. Contrast Live. Hey, good to have you on board today, folks. And I just want to go back and retreat just a little bit here, go back to a Tuesday's stream and pick up where we left off. For example, this is the last sketch I did on that this boat study, which we're still working on some of the empathic sketches for nautical or racing boat systems or boat design. And I won't take the time to go through some of the review things. And we went through the exercise, for example, reviewing what an empathy study is, the difference between empathy and a form shape study. And then they began to develop some sketches built around this whole idea of having this very stealthy looking, or this very long, elaborate looking boat system, catamaran, jet boat, so to speak, or a cigarette boat. And I thought it was interesting. This is the last sketch I did. This upper sketch here is the last one I did on Tuesday. And there were some things happening. I tried to look a triple piece to it here, but a little bit on the clumsy side. I mean, the idea is there, but I just didn't think that the forms were really quite fluid enough to explore yet. So I went back in and looked at this thing, and there's I started. I just added a couple of gestures here in elevation to kind of put some pieces together. And again, this whole thing in elevation was a real strong, very strong spring line under tension. So I think that's still a healthy piece to look at here. So I did a little vignette here of an elevation study, then went back into this, and I just really played up this whole idea of this very bulb-like, almost orca type profile or body section in elevation. And again, a real long needle nose on this thing and a high canopy in elevation. And I think, you know, there's still some of that happening in this guy. But this elevation form line here is interesting, and kind of stayed with it a little bit here in some of these sketches, but also went back in and just did some front elevations on getting some of these foils, for example, the hydrofoils. What are we looking at here? This is looking right at for some front elevation studies of the same, where you've got these wing structures coming out and beginning to fold into like what hydrofoils or floaters, so they fly on the water surface itself. So these are three little variations on a theme. So I'm going to really kind of take off on some of those pieces here and begin to look at some possibilities here. And before I leave this sketch, it was interesting. I looked at this thing this morning. I thought, you know, kind of interesting here. You know, the sway line, the plan view line is interesting. But what if I took that shape and flipped it 90 degrees? Just took this whole thing and turned it up on its side. What would that start to look like? So I'm going to take a quick look at that. If I find my pencil here, should be in good shape. I just dropped my pencil. Oh, there it is. Got it. All right, thank you. So now that I've got that squared away, I thought we'd just take the shape and just flip it up by 90 degrees and see what we come up with here. So let me just start with that same premise here and look at this thing from an elevation point of view. So if I flip that up, I would end up with something like this. It'd come along. It would break like so. Snap it to the right place. There's my high point or 50-inch line. I'm going to come back in and split it again. So it's that. Come into that. Now, do I want to take that same shape and add to it? Maybe we take that canopy and just kind of float it up on top. Bring that into play here. Take this thing and be a little more direct. With that, I'll come in with something underneath it to get a little bit of bulb to it. Now let's take that front end and give it that same kind of character, a little bit of an overhang peak to this, coming into that sponson. Now let's run that through. Let's take this line and just kind of break it a little bit here. Turn it into this. That's what that shape begins to look like to me. Let's take that line through and give it a real strong sense of, wait a minute here. This is interesting. What if that becomes part of the foil system, where this thing kind of folds out and begins to create a foil of some sort? And then this comes back almost orca-like. It just gives us this bulbous shape back into here. Now a section would come along here, drop back in. And let's put a little bit of a foil on this thing here. So what if I did this? Put a bit of like a twin tail. There. And there. That's an interesting shape. Just a bit of a variation change here. So I just, again, looking at this one was really kind of interesting in a way, because it has some merit to it, but I just didn't feel comfortable about adding some of that triple cantilever on this thing. And I wouldn't want to move it up. So just by rotating it a little bit and just taking the shape, as we said a few moments ago, just taking this form and just flipping it up and setting it on its side, so to speak, to see what we come up with here. And all of a sudden, it just changed the chemistry. But I think what was interesting about that is now that it's flipped over like that. Let me get a little bit of a sharper stick here. Now we've got a slot here to work with this foiling system. That could be kind of neat. Kind of break this in. And let's just break this out of here. So there's a separate pocket in there. This area here could become part of the foil system. It opens up and forms a wing or a flying process here to get them. I'm not quite sure yet about this overhead canopy here. Let's bring this on to play here. We did this. Let's open that right up. And out of that, so we have this coming underneath. And we have this little shape coming back on itself, that foil. This comes down underneath here. Let's put a little bit of tone in this thing now. And let it come into that form. Just rotate it right into that shape. Interesting. Now maybe the canopy is right there. Just bring that all forward and just kind of blister that back just a bit. And it's got an interesting shape or gesture to it. Let's kind of knock this out a little bit too. So that's where the negative is. So there's a good opportunity for a foil here. Let's get this needle overhang here. That's kind of interesting. And in here, a little hydraulic bank. And insert piece. Entry egress into the cockpit. And let's take that right on through into the second form here. Side step. This is a little bit of that to kind of give it some body to it. There it is. Underneath, move body into this. Now the plan view. That needle to work here. Turn it sideways just a bit here. We get this guy lined up. And that little nacelle port here, let's kind of bring that out. Let's kind of blister that just a bit. Run that through. And then depending on where that canopy is going to fall here. I'm starting to get some real rhythm to it now, some real thin, almost gossamer-like, almost dart-like approach to it. So I think a little more interested in terms of and then what happens here would be this. This would come out and articulate. And also that appearance. That would swing out, come up, and it begin to roll out of that shape itself. So we want to pull this back a little bit here. Let's just do this and see how much spush me. We might pull that back to about right there to get that thing to work. There we are. So there we are. That could be kind of interesting, couldn't it? You know, winged and a double foil and this little shark fin back here, or this little, the orca look that we've got coming after here. So there it is there. And just going to get this back. Just kind of give that little recess in here that we talked about earlier. And there it is there. And one more time here. Let's go back to a little bit of a side view study. If you're following along here, again, we're just trying to really come back to recreate. Well, what we started with was this approach right here, which is okay. I mean, there were some neat things going on in the sketch a little bit for the time being. I thought it was interesting that we ended up last Tuesday. Tuesday with this sketch, and I thought, yeah, it's an interesting start. There's some neat things happening up and through here. So I don't think you can take advantage of this thing and turning it sideways and get more of that same shape in the plan view that we have in the elevation. So we turn it around a little bit. We get this. Let me draw this through here for a second, and we'll just get this shape to really. There we are. Let's go back to another potential side view. Maybe it's a whole big strong line that cuts back on itself. It does that. Is that it? This becomes like a pod. This grows off the normal body side here. And a real long spring line. Again, maybe this is a natural bay for those wings to nest out of. So was it more of that? And this becomes intake. I don't know. So I get some really interesting shape and studies here, folks, in terms of putting together some really quick ideation. And again, if we go back to this thing and look at another, maybe that long spring line is the secret to it. Maybe it's more consistent like this. Then it kind of changes pace, blips up a bit, then falls back rapidly. It comes back again and returns on itself here. So it's a little more fluid. Now this comes back and picks up a nice thin line that does this. And out of that is where this wing cradle comes in, these foils. So that does that. Then we break this shape up again by coming back in and compounding it. Getting more of that rounded shape back here. Into foil. into foil. And again, the tail section here, a real strong, powerful rudder system. And again, has a little more flyer to it. A little bit of downhill. And maybe the cockpits are right in there, keeping it simple. And this goes. Turn this upside down for a moment here. And this becomes a very interesting set of circumstances here. Maybe it's this. I'm breaking up the graphics here just a bit. Some of the detail on the foil. That's interesting. We just kind of put some little concept sketches together here based on basic forms. Again, just looking at what the potentials might become, possibility of getting into this very bulbous looking form and shape here. So there's a couple of studies there in terms of what might happen when you take this shape that we started with here and begin to just turn it up on itself and get a lot more romantic in terms of what are the shapes doing in the side view that this plan view is telling me. So I took that same basic gesture and just went with a pure side view and opened up the blister and saw what happened from, again, this perspective into an elevation, into a plan view, and then a couple of very quick return studies into the elevations themselves. All of a sudden, excuse me, starting to take on a bit of a different personality. What I think is interesting too is that I've just started the whole program with this empathy series. We haven't lost some of the magic of the first one we did that we built this whole case on. I'm just expanding it a little bit more and using this a day as an exploratory day to find out are we on the right track. And before we go into some final renderings of this aquatic system, this jet boat process, see where we are. Interesting. So I think it's a lot of fun. Let's just start another one here. Just kind of sign this guy. So let's put that aside. There's another study. Let's carry on with that same principle here. What happens if we take that same approach and we go into a little bit of perspective here? Take that same approach, come back in, and really create this kind of a look now, where it's more stealth-like. A real genuine needle here. I'm just going to get this put together. Try a little bit of both here. Open that up in a plan view. Change the section here from that to that. Round that a little bit. Take that right through. Round this off. Now, let's see what we can come up with here. Let's put a little bit of cockpit. Let's put a little bit of some of the stealth character into this thing now. Go a little crisper with it. Get that spine to work. Well, maybe this is all part of. I don't know. I mean, it seems to be interesting, but it looks like it's not quite. It doesn't look linear enough or aquatic enough. I mean, I just don't know if that's the right approach to take. I mean, if I looked at this thing in the side view, what are we looking at here now? We got this very linear, very stealth-like. Comes along, have a chisel, steps up, comes back into the canopy area there, does that, and picks up this large stabilizer, which is now going to do that, which comes back into this tail section. It does this, and it drops right back into this hole. That piece comes along here. This continues to be that long stretched needle nose on this guy. There's the canard. This comes along and begins to just come across here. Let's get this first line in place here. It does this. Then it just breaks about right there. It comes into that foil, which is now roughly there. It breaks again, which gives us that. And again, underneath, it's got a little bit of a belly on this thing, so that's good. Comes down, breaks back up again, and gives us that. And there's a stealth process here, so this kind of comes along, goes through, picks up a little bit of that canopy there. There's the cockpit. Again, there's an intake here, so this piece comes along. And this is where that wing module is. Let's get that in place. Let's cheat the view a little bit, show you where that's going to come out of play here. But based on what I'm seeing here, I just like, it's just something that's a whole lot healthier, I think. Aircraft-like, but I'm not sure if that's what we're after as far as character goes. We'll just have to reweigh this thing, but there's an elevation, say what that form might look like. Is it boat type? Yeah, I'm sure it has characteristics and wings and so forth that kind of unfold at speed. Interesting series of catches, but I still think going back to something like this, a little rounder, I think is a lot more personality to it. Let me just kind of cover these up a bit. We're just going to slide through them here a little bit and see what you think. There's some very interesting things here in terms of just shape and form. There's something more sculptural about this thing. It looks more aquatic. I think the more you try to go stealth with this thing, even from an empathic point of view, it doesn't have the same personality or strike. Let's go back and try something here. Let's just do this. Let's go back to that same strike, that same spring line again. Let's open that up. It's a strong spring line. Let's kind of do this. Let's put that in place there. Go back to that rounder. There it is. I don't know. I just think there's something a lot more when you break this shape up. You're very crisp against that round form there. It has a lot more care. I think this is much more in line with what we're after, especially when you start adding a little bit more girth to the form itself, just coming underneath it, being very strong with that shape. And again, this is very round in here, very round section, which is, I think, healthy. This middle recess area where the wings might come up, for example, and we can kind of accentuate that with a little bit of a harbor area for those things to settle into. This becomes underneath here, just a little bit of a belly change. It goes from round to sharp underneath it. And again, still pushing maybe that canopy right back into here. Just to get a real sense of massive scale. This thing is really, all of a sudden, I mean, that has a lot more romance to it, I think, as far as being an aquatic system, as opposed to being stealth. I mean, I'm not opposed to the stealth approach, but it's hard to make that look like it really belongs in this category. And maybe it does. I'm not saying it right, but we'll try again a little bit more and a little bit later in the stream here. Let's go back and finish this little thumbnail study here. Get that roundness back in play. And just to develop enough set contour through this thing. So it's now that. Into soften that off. Let's put more contrast into this. I mean, this just has, maybe add that secondary piece here. And just for fun, let's see what happens if we do this. Go to the designation and say, go to graphic stripe. Some sort. No, I don't like the green here. Hang on a second here. Let's give it some real punch. Go back and give it a little bit more designation here. This is the body color or material change here. There we go. Kind of a spooky little form there, just kind of breaking into a little bit more section and detail. Let me sharpen these sticks here for a little bit. So I mean, I think we've got some pretty good information here to work with. I think I'm getting more and more comfortable with getting that form down, or that empathy study into this context here, and doing some neat things with it. So I'm going to do a little trick here. It's going to change gears on us. And we'll continue to do some of these exploratory sketches and see where we end up with here in terms of ideation here. So let's do this for a moment. And I'm going to come back to this. Let's get these guys. Let's put these aside for a moment. I'm going to come back in and switch gears and go to a tone paper study here. Just do some really quick gesture sketches based on what we're talking about here, what we've seen, what we're starting to discover in this whole empathic series in phase 3. So let's go back in here for a second and say, okay, let's go back to that last sketch we just did. Go back into here. Get that sweep line to come in. Let's change here. Get that round bulbous form to work. Let's come out of it. And again, same thing up front. Just going to give it that same speed form. Just going to break this into shape here. Just going to break that in there. There it is there. That's that. Now it's this to this. It's upside down and get a little bit of strike to it here. And let's see what happens here. If we just kind of come back in, a little bit of color designation here to get that wing system to work, where they're going to calm and they're going to fall in place here. That's where they're located. Let's put a little bit of a recess or pocket where they kind of sit in here. Let's put a little detail in this thing, a little bit of color. And there it is. Let's put a little bit of water line in here so we know where that's going to be, right about there. So there's A. Let's kind of go back and look at some stuff here. Same process, a little thumbnail sketch. Just exploring how to create this shape and this form. This empathic study, taking it down the pike here. wing area. And just some more detail in this thing here. Some tied down, a little more line thrust in this thing. That form kind of separates. A little bit of a dorsal fin. Maybe that's a little bit of a different color designation. There we go. There's some interesting little shapes here. Just looking at how to begin to get this gesture to work for us here. So let's go back, and I really think this is a much favorable form to deal with here. So much more fluid. It's not as forced. It doesn't seem to still can be a catamaran. We can look at that down the line here, but let's go back in, and again, it's a very sheer sketches here. Got that one. Again, that very round form. Cockpit. Let's get this underneath here. Wing area that just kind of folds out of the top. Sponsors up on top of this guy. And underneath. Another approach. Just very, very simple empathic studies here. Putting it all together. Let's go back and look at this. Let's see what happens here. We got to put this thing into some sort of perspective here. Foils. Recess pocket where they unfold or swing out from. Canopy. Body section. And really round. And then we go back to a sheer, almost peaked front end in this guy. Just going to give it more distinction. And down to the sponson here down below. Look at the graphics and the wing tip itself. Again, there's a little study again, getting just looking at different ways of playing the shape and getting these forms to run and read for us, and really doing some interesting things here with some shape and just unique in terms of keeping it very, very fluid, keeping it very empathic, very spontaneous, and very muscular looking. Interesting set of circumstances there, gang. So not bad. I think we just go back and let's look at this. Let's go back. There's one. I'll come back to those in just a moment here. Let's start another series here. Again, really long drag on this guy. Let's get this really kind of, get that stream to work here. Now I'm going to come back in here, pick up that same very round bulbous form to just change the pace here. Break it up again. Let's just do this. Let's come back to this guy. And create this pod on the side. So this comes along and steps out. And at the same time, you can come back in and create a natural nesting place for the canopy. Maybe that sets up just a little bit higher, so it's almost above that surface. So that kind of picks up on top of itself there. That's interesting. And this drops off quite a bit. That comes back. Wing pocket. It's going to be a little bit of a bulge or a blister change here. The kind of section comes out, forms a negative, comes back into a shadow drop here where that vacuole is. So this is all in shadow. I'll show you a plan view of that in just a moment. That comes out. And that can have a different surface or a different color to it. That could be kind of neat too. Which is kind of, that's maybe more of a crimson material change in here. There's that. And right, come back in here. Section in this thing. There it is, just kind of a different gesture altogether here. Just kind of putting some pieces together. Let's put that wing foil in place too. I'm just going to get that designated. And again, it's extremely crisp, yet at the same time, very fluid looking forms. I think this is a lot more comfortable in terms of getting that gesture to look like it's a real speed form in terms of being a catamaran sort of a shape. Let's put this in a plan view so you can see what we're after here. This thing in a plan view can be very unique. So it's this. Let's get the needle to work. I'm going to come back into this thing. Butterfly it back here. And this becomes, let's get that needle to really run here. So it's going to really extend that nose on this thing. So it's going to, there's the needle. There's the needle. Here are the sponsons. Front canards. Turn this inside here just a little bit. These guys do work for us. That's up front. Now we've got the areas where the wing systems are. So that's sitting in there. And then this area here is really unique. This now comes out and does the following. It has a lot more pod to it. That's what that shape is doing right there. That comes out and blends right back into the form. But it has a main body form up on top. And again, this is where the cockpit is. We're going to take that back and just kind of let it disappear. Let it disappear. I'm going to abbreviate it. Sharpen the stick a little bit here. Wing sections come out. Designate that in just a moment. Let's just got to put a little bit of finishing touch on this thing. Just going to pull this back, get that real elongated tail section on this thing. There it is. And last but not least, a couple of canards of stabilizers. And again, wings. And again, the path. In, out. Again, that area right there is where that little nacelle is taking place, right there and right there. So there's a plan view of that guy. And just it's a very interesting gesture, I think, in terms of what we're looking for here as far as depth, character, personality, all the things we're dealing with in this series of studies here. Let's try a little thumbnail sketches here. It's going to change the gesture again. It's going to get that same creep here, same long stem. And it's just going to come back and keep that same basic form. Back into it here. There it is. Let's make that really come forward here. Shoot that through. And let's see here. Ah, this is neat. Let's try this. Let's elevate that canopy. Let's get that canopy up here like so. Let's elevate it up the normal surface. So that's doing that. And let's just see here. Just gonna get this guy to let's get the wing. So let's really play this wing up here. A really long span of wing here. This kind of runs right through the entire shape. And again, behind it, very simple gesture here. And a cantilever canopy on that thing. And this could be a negative in here too. That could be kind of fun too. Let's just roll that in there. See what happens if that becomes a negative space. Boy, that's interesting. So the whole thing is open in that area there. That's kind of cool. Now let's go back in and look at these guys one more time here. This just variations on theme. Let's see what happens if we come back in with something that's a little more less fluid here. Still have the same. Maybe it's a little bit more straightforward here. Let's just do this. Let's go back in and get this. Maybe not so much spring, but almost flat up on top here. Keep that in line. Bring that into play, but again, still play up that really round, but change character. So going to break this up just a bit. So a little squarer with this thing. Let's land it forward. Let's bring it a whole spike area here. Up front. Really lean that thing out. Here we go for wings. And behind it, excuse me, let's take that shape and just roll it off here and do that with it. That's neat. That's going to go round. It's going to go back to shear. It's going to be a little rounder in here. Back to shear again. And sharpen the stick just a bit. We get that line to just break right through for us here. Operations. Back into wing. And again, let's just do this. Let's have fun with this thing. Let's see if we cantilever that canopy back here. Just for what it's worth. A real low-key canards. That's interesting. And again, let's put a little bit of where that wing structure is. And again, a little bolder underneath there. A little rounder, and the mass of the fuselage here. Into that shape. Maybe up on top here, just a little bit of relief. So there you are. There's another really strong gesture in terms of how to put these pieces together, elevations and plan views. And I think today was a good time spent on just getting some exploratory things done in these empathic sketches. And I think let me go back in a real quick review here to wrap it up. Let me just kind of sign these boards off here, and we'll just kind of get you organized, get it started. That's that one. Let's go to this one. And we'll come back to this one here. We'll just throw a couple of these together since we put a little bit of time into these guys, and we'll just kind of review where we are here, how we got to this stage. And I think based on this too, it's going to be kind of a lot of fun. Based on this whole operation today, this exploratory side of getting a little more fundamental in terms of, I still want to go back to catamaran, but I'll use maybe some of these studies here we just did on Canson to go back and really exaggerate those shapes, see what we can come up with. But that's a lot more, I think, a lot more exploratory from my point of view, satisfaction of where we are today as opposed to where we started. For example, let's start with that one. We look at that one. And that one. We'll go through a real quick review here. We'll get these guys signed. That one's good to go. So we started the stream today with this approach here. We ended on Tuesday with this basic catamaran study here, a trimaran. And it was interesting, but I think it had a little bit of clumsiness to it. But the more I looked at it, the more I began to see some interesting things. We took that same ship and just turned it up on its side and worked with it as just an elevation study. What would happen with that, but yet still keep some of that same long needle-like approach to it. And then these are little front-end studies based on some of the hydrofoiling systems that might take place in the vehicle itself. So that was sketch one. Then went back to this guy for sketch two and really started to look at that whole, this view here is this study turned up on its side. Oh, pardon me. This study just turned on its side. Then began to explore that a lot, see what that began to do. And I think some interesting things started to happen. So a lot more fluid, a lot more aquatic looking, and a lot more what I refer to as almost slippery, aquatic-like. It came back to the original concept of the empathy we did about a week ago, just those empathy studies where it's a lot real thin, slim, but yet real fluid studies to it. So that was the second sketch we did. Then the third study was just trying to go a little bit more stealth with it and go to sharp edge. And it looked more aircrafty. It didn't look like a nautical piece, whereas this one started, I went back to the round again, just to kind of get that established and keep that empathic tune or that story being told here. Not bad, interesting set of circumstances, but not quite the same drama I think that the roundness had. So from that point, went back to this study and looked at this and went into some really quick, fast and Canson sketches and elevations and plan views, just exploring some of the gestures of the shape we're dealing with here. Again, I think there's some good things that have come out of this series here. I'm glad we spent the time to go back and look at this. That could be interesting in terms of adding a catamaran to it and going to a double blister. Any one of these sketches, I think, could categorize that very easily. So I'm going to really take the time to analyze these sketches and move into something maybe next Tuesday with some final design ideas to get this program settled and in good shape. And then the last set we did was just getting a lot more bold and adventuresome in some of these shapes, getting into some of the, pardon me, the cockpit areas, canopy areas up off the plant on deck. This could be a great, all of these could be great candidates. This could be nice, just again, coming up, if you can imagine this plan view and this boom coming off of those two cantilevers with that catamaran could be very interesting. I still want to go back to that as an exploratory piece. So again, so much to deal with here, but a lot of fun today, just taking a little bit of time to go back and explore some of the things we've been dealing with in this whole empathic boat studies in terms of getting what I refer to as like a catamaran cigarette boat. Really interesting series of things to be discussed. So I want to thank you for taking the time here today to be a part of the stream. I'll just leave these up for viewing purposes here. This is where we actually ended up. Pardon me, that's not where we ended up. We ended up with this plate here. If you have any questions or concerns about the presentation today, please feel free to drop me a line at jim@drcontrast.com. That's my email address if I can be any assistance to you, to kind of work with you on some things. Again, more than happy to help there. And again, take a moment to visit my website at drcontrast.com, where we've got some interesting, an interesting drawing program of 9 lessons that might be of some assistance to you as well. And stay tuned. We're adding some apparel lines and some additional things to the site itself once the store is organized. We're getting very close to that. I know we've been talking about that for the last 2 weeks, but just making sure things are right and we've got the right apparel selected and the right costing on the site. That's going to be very, to me, very critical to make sure we get that right. So once again, thank you so much for your time today. And I always sign up with this, and I think it's so true. And it's comes from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate you all taking the time to be with me today. And always do this. Never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much. We'll see you Tuesday. All the very best, and dare to be great. Thank you. Bye-bye.